7 recommendations for school feeding programs in the African Union. In this video, we present a set of recommendations on how countries can build national, sustainable school feeding programs operating within a systems approach to development, taking into account their impact on different areas. Recommendation 1. Link school feeding programs to international, continental, and national development agendas. Many sectorial and policy outcomes associated with school feeding programs align with a variety of objectives and goals enshrined in international development documents, and a number of countries have already taken note of school feeding's relevance to national development. However, when advocating for school feeding's inclusion into national, continental, and/or international development agendas, the emphasis should fall not on school feeding's theoretical alignments with development objectives, but on demonstrating school feeding's real contributions to established objectives, indicators, and targets. Recommendation 2. Design and implement school feeding programs to achieve cross-sectoral policy objectives. The design and implementation of school feeding programs that achieve cross-sectoral policy objectives feature 2 characteristics. At the institutional arrangements level, policymakers define and formalize cross-sectoral policy objectives and how such objectives will be strategically addressed. And at the program design level, policymakers select which design features or policy levers will be employed to achieve the stated policy objectives. For example, school gardens can simultaneously enhance the nutritional content of school meals through the provision of daily, fresh produce while providing an opportunity for students to learn about agriculture, and take-home rations can have spillover effects on the nutritional status of other children in the recipient student's household and to improve overall household food security to targeted students. Recommendation 3. Invest in and empower multi-sectoral response and coordination mechanisms. School feeding programs are complex interventions and become more complex as they increase in scale and include more activities related to homegrown smallholder production and other complementary interventions. At lower levels of implementation, an array of dedicated, multi-sectoral actors is needed to ensure that school feeding programs meet their objectives and that there are no ruptures in service delivery. While multi-sectoral response and coordination strongly determine institutional arrangements at the central and strategic levels, the level of centralization mainly influences the school feeding program's institutional arrangements at the regional, district, local, and school levels. Recommendation 4. Commit to developmental procurement strategies that exert a strong focus on increasing local production capacities. Across the continent, different procurement strategies are employed to purchase, transport, and store the commodities required for school feeding programs. The strategies range from highly centralized procurement to decentralized strategies, where responsibilities are transferred to regions and districts, often resulting in increased purchasing of local goods. As scale of a school feeding program increase and decentralization of tasks progresses and community participation grows, the reliance on locally produced and grown goods to supply school meals intensifies. Recommendation 5. Innovate financial arrangements to diversifying sources of financing for school feeding programs and/or putting into place co-financing mechanisms. School feeding costs vary significantly and depend on a range of factors, including the level of centralization, targeting approach, inclusion of complementary interventions, and the procurement strategy, among other factors. Budget constraints to school feeding programs are faced by many African Union member states. However, a more expensive program does not necessarily mean a more effective program. The focus of the financial arrangements section is not on how much money to spend on a school feeding program, but how to best allocate available money in order to maximize returns and future impacts, which in turn maximize program sustainability. Recommendation 6. Devote resources to stronger M&E system and automate feedback processes to improve policy outcomes. Without a concrete and executable approach to monitoring and evaluation, there is no way to track and measure outcomes from school feeding programs, and without evidence of progress against program indicators, it is difficult to evaluate a school feeding program's success in reaching its stated objectives or encourage financial contributions, often linked to the sectorial returns from other involved line ministries. The structure of monitoring and evaluation reporting depends on a range of factors, such as the level of centralization for program implementation and program objectives. Recommendation 7. Deepen and learn from South-South and Pan-African cooperation to optimize policy impacts. Strengthen South-South and Pan-African cooperation is part of efforts to reach higher levels of development, resilience, equity, growth, and social cohesion across the African continent. South-South and Pan-African cooperation entail African Union member states working together towards common goals, as well as capitalizing on forums for closer economic collaboration, development, and learning. South-South cooperation stresses that initiatives must be determined by the countries of the South, guided by the principles of respect for national sovereignty, national ownership and independence, equality, non-conditionality, non-interference in domestic affairs, and mutual benefit.